Hey coders! In the previous lesson, we have learned about CSS backgrounds. In this lesson, we are diving into how elements are displayed on a web page using CSS. Ever wondered why some elements take up the whole line while others sit side by side? That's where display properties come in. Let's learn CSS display property in CSS Float. Before that, let's learn the difference between a block element and an inline element. A block level element takes up the full width of the page, pushing content to a new line. P, H1 to H6, LI, table all are block elements. On the other hand, an inline element only takes up necessary space and stays in the same line. Examples include anchor, input, and button tags. Every HTML element comes with a natural behavior. Some are block level and others are inline. But what if we want to change that behavior? That's where the display property steps in. It lets us control how an element appears on the page. The default display value for most elements is block or inline. The display property is used to change the default display behavior of HTML elements. Let's explore the types of displays. Some elements act like big boxes and push others away. Others flow like words in a sentence. These behaviors are controlled by the display property. First, we have block. This makes the element take the full width of its parent, like a big box that always starts on a new line. Tags like div or p behave this way. Next is inline. Inline elements stay in the flow. They don't break the line and only take as much space as they need. Perfect examples are span or anchor tags. Next is inline-block. It flows like inline, but gives you the control of block. You can set its width and height. And last common value used for display is display none. This one's like a magic cloak. It makes the element disappear completely from the page. These values give us the power to control how elements behave and interact. Next property for displaying elements using CSS is float. Float allows HTML elements to shift left or right and let other elements wrap around. It is commonly used for floating images and creating column layouts. The float property can have one of the following values. Float. Left is used to float the elements to the left of its container. Float. Right is used to float the elements to the right of its container. Float. None says that the element does not float. It is the default property. Look at this example carefully. You'll notice that the image is floating to the right side of the container, and the paragraph is wrapping neatly around it. I've given the image a fixed width and height, and added a bit of padding to make it look more beautiful and spaced out. This is the same example as previous example. In this example, the image is floating to the left of the paragraph. In this example, the image will be displayed just where it occurs in the text. Float none property is the default behavior of float. If you are not floating elements left or right, it will be displayed one after another without wrapping around. If you ever see your layout breaking because of float, just clear it. This tells the next element to stay away from the floated chaos. In this example, you can see that the image has property set, but it is still not floating because the paragraph has clear both property set. The clear property for paragraph makes it start from the next line instead of wrapping around the image. Let's take a fun detour. You know, when we add pictures in Word, we get these layout options to control how pictures behave with text. Well, the CSS properties we discussed today work just like it. If you choose inline with text, that's like using display. Inline, your element behaves just like text. When you choose top and bottom, it's like display. Block, the element pushes everything to a new line. And wrap text, that's exactly what we do in CSS using the float property. Isn't that cool? Let's now see these in action. In Microsoft Word, when you have some image and text, it shows you the layout options. You can set the layout option to inline with text, so it appears like this where the text starts right after the image in the same line. CSS Display inline will act like the same. You can also style it with top and bottom. You can see that the image and text are acting like block elements and the text is starting from the bottom of the image. CSS Display block will act like the same. You can also see that there is a layout option name as square. Using square layout option, you can set the image right or left of the content and the text will wrap around it. The CSS Float property acts in the same manner. Let's see it in our website. In our about.html page, we have logo image, a heading and some paragraphs about the company and team members. I am making a small change in the HTML file. I am going to put this image tag inside the info div tag so that we can see how elements of the same container will arrange using CSS display properties. Let's give a border to the image, the heading and the paragraphs inside the company div so that we can visualize it better. I am writing a comment here in our style sheet. For now, I only want these changes for company class members, therefore using the class selector to select only those elements. You can see all elements clearly now. By default, the heading, paragraphs and image are block level elements. They appear one below the other and take the full width available. Let's try display inline. Refresh the page. You can see how both the image, the heading and the text are now sitting side by side like words in a sentence. Let's try to give some width to this heading. Refresh the page. You can see that the width we set are being ignored. You can also inspect the element and can see that the width property is disabled. This is because of the behavior of inline elements. Inline elements only take the space of the content. Now let's try something special, inline block. The image and text are still side by side, but now we can control their size. This gives us the best of both worlds. You can see that now the width is applied to the heading. Back to display. Block. Refresh the page. You can see that our image and text are now back on their own lines, taking up the full space. Block elements always start on a new line. You can set the height and width of all block elements. I want to show my logo image to the left side and the heading and the paragraphs should be on its right side. For now I am commenting this part. Let's go to the place where we style our company image logo. Let's set the float left property to this company logo image. Here comes the magic of float. We made the image float to the left, and look, our text wraps nicely around it, just like in MS Word's layout options. But I don't want these two paragraphs to be wrapped around the logo. These paragraphs are the direct child inside the company section tag. Let's style it. Using Child Element Selector, we can style these paragraphs. As we have studied today that the clear CSS property is used when we don't want elements to float. So here we will use clear both CSS properties so that the paragraphs will not float to left and right both. Refresh the page. You can see now the paragraphs are not floating and appearing in the next line as block elements. Let's give the same height to this div as we have height for our logo so that it appears side by side properly. Between the logo image and the paragraphs I want some space. For this you can add margin right to image tag. It's looking pretty cool now. Let's apply the same silling to our team members. Now it's looking pretty nice and clean. You can apply CSS display properties in much better way to style your elements. Now it's your turn. Add a section in about.html page for About Me, and add your image. Add a short paragraph describing yourself. Style the layout using display, inline, and observe what happens. Style using display, inline-block, and add width or padding. Try using float right for the image and let the text wrap around it. Add a background color to the section for better visibility. Below the floated image and text, add one or two more paragraphs and ensure they appear after the floated content. Use clear both or structure accordingly. In today's lesson, we have learned what are block and inline elements, CSS display property including display, inline, display, block and display, inline block. What is CSS float property? How to use CSS clear property. How CSS display properties are similar to MS Word layout options. In the next video, we will cover about CSS positioning and z-index. See you there. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our exciting lessons.